Recording in progress. Welcome back to another episode of Working Class Fishing. I'm John Morris. I think down here is Brian Keachley and our guest, the illustrious Dustoff Fishing, Brandon Heinrichs. Dude, thanks so much for coming on.
Been waiting for you to call me, man.
Well,
Jeez.
Dave, there's always these scheduling conflicts, between you flying helicopters and catching slobs. It's kind of hard to get a hold of you sometimes.
I am a busy person. Yes. So.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun just watching over the past year, seeing everything that you've been doing. And for us, we've talked about it over and over and over again. Like, we got to get Brandon on. We got to get Brandon on. We got to get Brandon on. And it's like, hey, I'm busy. I'm going here. I'm doing this. I got, work to do, everything else. And then when John let me know last week, he's like, hey, Brandon's down at any time. I was like, well, let's get him on. Come on. Let's go.
Yeah, yeah, I'm stoked. I'm stoked to be here. Glad you guys called me.
Dude, so you go ahead and do whatever you gotta do. We met, I guess it was a year ago. And I've got to say, not to start this out on like a tearjerker, but you were like the first person like outside of my family to believe in me. And that meant a lot. So just being where I am now is a lot because of you. And I'll go into some things that you said that we can say on here. And dude, just thanks. Like, you are like an incredibly humble and positive icon in the fishing community. So thank you so much for that, dude.
I appreciate it, man. And I appreciate your friendship. So that's all I need.
But Brandon, dude, why don't you, sorry, my cat's coming up here. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. So my name's Brandon. It is a little misleading because my handle is Dustoff Fishing, and people generally think that my name is Dustin or Dusty, which it is not. And so just to give people insight on where that comes from, in Army aviation, Dustoff is the call sign for medical evacuation. So I did a medevac tour with the Army in 2012 to Afghanistan, and then I did another tour to Iraq in 2018 and 19. So I'm from mid-Missouri. I've lived in Missouri my whole life. Midwest guy through and through for sure. Minus Army assignments to places unknown, but yeah, I'm married. I got a 12-year-old little girl. She turns 13 in May, and fly helicopters, like you said, and getting ready to leave for a school in Pennsylvania. And it just seems like I've either been at school or fishing or Instagramming or, dadding basically this whole year. And I did start my my Instagram page November 6th of 2020.
Yeah, it's been wow. I mean, just in the time from the time that I got to meet you, and we all kind of came together, this great fishing community that we have on Instagram. We all came together, and I remember, I think you were like, if we're going to talk about followers and social media, I think you may have been at like 600 or 700 followers, and I may have been at like 100. And you're like, hey, dude, really like your stuff, and it was like, who is this guy? He's super cool. And then I go on your profile, and here's you put up a picture of like an Apache, and then the next picture is like, you with this big largemouth bass, and then the next picture is like of your kayak and then your boat. And I was like, dude, this guy's like all over the place. He's so busy, but he always makes time to say, hey, what's up to everybody. And whether it's just dropping like a thumbs up emoji or something, it's like, this comes from this person, and he's putting in the time and effort, even if it takes a second to hit boom, boom, done, or hit a like or whatever. This is coming from this person. And I'm like, how does he have the time? And then, yeah, having a family and everything. So one of my first question is how do you manage doing all of this stuff?
Basically organization and a system. So, I have my drafts done the day before, so I don't have to think about what I'm posting the next day. I'll try to get up and post at the same time every day, so people will have that consistency from me. You're right. I do try to comment or reply to comments almost every time. And I get close. I'm not perfect, but I feel like, especially people that take time to comment on my things, I feel like I should reciprocate that. And some of that falls off and ebbs and flows between, people that used to comment on my stuff don't comment anymore. And that's fine, because one, I don't want you to feel obligated to comment on anything that I do. And two is, I understand that people have, like you said, we're all busy. We all have things going on. And sometimes parts of your, year, month, day are busier than others. So I've had to kind of learn, when you get more people to follow your page, you get less and less time to do and focus on, small things. And so I've really tried to have some perspective and balance, and I haven't been able to get to as many people's posts, and I haven't been able to follow back as many people, because you got to understand, if I give you a follow back, if I followed everybody who followed me, I'd be following 12,000 people, and then I wouldn't have time for anyone. You know what I mean? So really, I guess to answer your question, it's just organization, a system, and then attitude and effort. I always tell my daughter, I want two things from you. I want attitude and effort. And if you give me those two things, I'm happy.
Dude, so recently Brian said kayak. You've been hitting the kayak fishing game pretty hard, dude. You just picked up a pretty significant partnership with oh man, it Echo, right? So,
Mhm, yeah.
dude, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so I'm officially on the New Canoe Pro Staff team for the Central Region, which I'm one of 3 people they have on that team. And I developed that through a partnership with Eco Fishing, and specifically 2 people. One of the owners is Caleb Braun, and the manager of the Lake Ozark store in Camdenton, which is Travis Randall. And so, just like with anything else, just with I always tell people, I know that I don't have this sponsorship with New Canoe and Eco because of my fishing pedigree. I am smart enough to realize that they see an investment in my basically advertising pull, marketing pull for their product, and I'm okay with that. So what I ended up doing was, I got on a podcast like this with a guy named Carlos Torres, who Lone Star Kayak Fishing, I think.
Yeah.
And he was working for Eco Fishing Shop at the time. Well, Travis watched that episode, and then he got a hold of me through Carlos, and we had a conversation where he said, I want to bring you on in some capacity. I'm not sure what that is. I need to talk to the owner, and, I'll get back to you. And I was like, okay, yeah, no problem. And I didn't think it was going to be anything crazy, and I didn't hear from him for like months, like maybe a month and a half, 2 months. And he calls me up out of the blue, and he's like, hey, you want to go to dinner with me and Caleb, which is the owner? And I said, yeah, I'd love to, and I went out to dinner with them, and I did exactly what I'm doing here. I talked entirely too much. And, apparently Caleb and I hit it off pretty good. And what's my most proud of thing, and I don't take credit for anybody else's success. Okay. So I don't take credit for any of Ryan's successes or Jake's or Garrett's or Mason's or anybody, Jonathan's, but we've developed this Eco Fishing team crew, and he asked me, hey, who do you think would be good for this team? And I gave him a couple names, and I said they'd probably be interested. I had no idea it was going to go to this level, and so like I tell everybody else, I'm really focusing hard on getting my fishing to catch up with my Instagramming, so that I can be a little more a better fisherman basically, and kind of live up to the hype. So you see me on the water a lot. You'll see me out in the kayak a lot, because that I feel is, kind of like you went to the fly tying. Sometimes your path is just shown to you. You kind of get on the journey, and then you don't know which way you want to go: boat fishing, kayak fishing, fly tying, bait making, whatever. And the path kind of shows itself to you. And I found that the kayak fishing, I still fish out of boats and I still like to boat fish, but the kayak fishing is kind of my niche, and it has shown itself to me. And so I'm really going to take that and run with it over the next couple of years and see where we can go with it.
Well, you talk about your, fishing pedigree not being caught up, but when the thing that I see a lot of is that you're using a lot of different baits, a wide variety of baits, tackle techniques. You're fishing year round. Everything else, I guess I just in regards to sponsorship, I would almost say that just based on the fact that you're catching fish all 4 seasons of the year, it's not looking too bad.
Yeah. So, thanks, Brian. I fished with a friend of mine named Russ. We fished a couple tournaments, and like John said, I try to stay humble. I try to have perspective and self-awareness, and I try to focus and fix my weaknesses as much as I possibly can. And so, Russ told me one time, he said, "Dude, you're a better fisherman than you think you are." And I really appreciate Russ for saying that. But kind of like you want to get to the top of the mountain, you kind of have to feel like you've got work to do, regardless of whether you actually have work to do or not. You always have to feel like the next guy's outworking you. He's doing more than you are. He's on the water right now, and it's snowing outside, and you're sitting in your house comfortable, and so that was my goal this year. Was this winter I was going to take it seriously. I was going to only fish for bass. And because it's easy to get into a situation where you're like, the bass aren't biting, so I'm just going to crappie fish, or I'm just going to bluegill fish, or, catfish, because those fish are more willing participants in the winter than bass are. And I just said, no, I'm not doing that this year. I'm going to figure out how to catch bass, or I'm going to skunk. And I skunk sometimes, but only once or twice, and I'm proud of that. That was one of my main goals this winter, was to catch fish all year round. So it was a good learning experience for sure.
So what are some techniques that you've picked up recently or overall that you just kind of jive with? I mean, are you a big jig guy now? Are you a lot of finesse fishing? Are you beating banks? Are you offshore now? Like what are you keying in on, if you want to share that? I know that's a really broad question, but what's your kind of go-to comfortable spot right now?
So I think when anybody starts, they start on spinning tackle and they start on finesse, because that's what's the most comfortable for most people to fish. Senkos and Ned rigs and worms and Texas rigs and stuff like that are like kind of basic level fishing. You throw it out, you let it sink to the bottom, you hop it back a couple times, and you catch a fish. But I progressed into really enjoying flip and brush and cover, river fishing, kind of sliding and skipping into undercut banks, and finding kind of the hard to get to fish over this last summer. And then I was really not good at jerk baits. So I went with Russ, and he taught me how to fish a jerk bait. And I went from hating jerk baits to almost exclusively throwing them in the wintertime this winter. And obviously I was very successful with that application. And it's definitely a tool in my tool bag now as we, move in to the fishing season. But I gravitate more towards honestly just letting the fish tell me what the technique is that I need to apply. And so what I mean by that is I'll beat the banks, but if they're not at the banks and I'm graphing fish deep, then I'm going to go with a jig and wrap or a drop shot or a spoon, and try to catch, some of those deeper fish or a football jig and drag it, down on those deep points. But that's kind of like fishing 101. Like everybody says jerk baits in the winter, everybody says you're going to throw shaky heads or wacky rigs or big swim baits on bed fish in the spring, or cranks, red cranks right about now, pre-spawn, they're feeding up, so I'm sticking to a lot of the well-known stuff. It's not a secret what I'm doing. That's the key that I want to tell people. It's like, and kayak fishermen are kind of like this versus bass boat fishermen is, we'll kind of share, what's working for us. I posted a couple days ago the top 3 jerk baits that I had this winter, and I know people that have bought those jerk baits and then caught fish on them, good fish, like 21-inch fish, so if you subscribe to my YouTube or you follow me on Instagram, you're definitely going to know what I'm fishing. And one of the reasons why I do that, and last point on this, is because I can look at March of last year and see what I was catching fish on. And it's a chronological documentation of how I catch fish, where I catch fish, and I can go, oh yeah, about this time last year, I caught some really nice bass on a Texas rig creature bait made by Morrison Sons Custom Baits. So I'll just tie one of those on and go catch me a big old bass.
Yeah, that's the cool part of and I was looking at that a couple days ago. I was like, okay, I'm going to go back through my photo archive. When did I start seeing the bluegill like actually show? Because I'm a panfish fanatic on the fly. So I go back, I'm like, all right, I got March 30th of last year around here, and that's when I actually started seeing them. So I totally get what you're saying with having that chronology of like, okay, when did I start catching these fish on what bait? And that's like, okay, they're going to start eating on the surface, or they're going to be eating subsurface, or they're going to be willing to chase. So that's a really solid way to use your photos and your photo journal documentation of like what's working, what's going on. The kayak community, and you were talking about, the kayak community really shares a lot of information in and amongst itself, whereas maybe and we're talking about the boating bass community here versus the guys that go out and they buy the big tracker, the Lund or whatever else, and those guys kind of like, hey, I'm not going to tell you what I'm catching fish on. In the mind of bass fishing, in my world, it doesn't like make sense, because it's like, the bass, whatever. But for you guys, that's like your main sport fish. Have you noticed any kind of I don't want to say contention, but do you run into any issues with the bass boat guys versus the kayak guys when you're out there fishing?
Very, very rarely. And I think it's mostly just because people don't understand etiquette, and it's kind of like walking in front of somebody's putt line, you just don't do it. It's kind of the same thing as you don't just drive a bass boat up on the, between me and the point that I'm working towards, and fish, just because I'm in a, some people like to say like a Legoland boat or a plastic, so, I get a little haterade on Instagram and just very little stuff. Most of the boater issues is not like fishing boaters. It's these, pleasure boaters out on Lake of the Ozarks come by on their wake boats, 20 feet from me. And, that's really the most of the issue. And what's great about like Instagram and being with like a company like Motion, most of the people that are with Motion Fishing are Missouri anglers that fish out of bass boats around here. And so, you kind of get an appreciation. You get to know people that do a different level of fishing than you do. And you kind of get an understanding and appreciation for, what they do as well. So, yeah.
I mean, just touch on the whole, wake boats and stuff. Dude, that's just, that's pretty dangerous to kayak fishermen specifically.
Yeah.
That could kill a man, that.
Yeah.
It's bad etiquette, but I don't know, man. I feel like something ought to be said about that. I don't think dudes are just thinking like that. I know they're out there to enjoy the water just like everyone else, but they can seriously, they can kill someone in a kayak, especially a less experienced person, you know, heaven forbid they're not wearing a PFD or something like that.
Yeah, I got flipped last year on Taneycomo. So been there.
Yeah. Yeah, we have actually, so our Marine board here, and I don't know if it's similar in Missouri or Texas for that matter, John, but our Marine board's actually designated different places where you can go and water ski, and then there's places where you can't, because generally the wakeboarders and the water skiers, they're going to be in a boat that generates a lot of wake. That's what makes it fun. But they have their designated areas where they're supposed to actually like go to. And it makes me curious, on some of the lakes, do they have some of those restrictions in place where it's like, hey, this is a no wake, you know, area, like where you can go play, and then there's like a place where, you know, the paddle sport folks can go play, or the, you know, the people that don't want to get thrown around like a rag doll?
Yeah, just like no wake zones, but you know, generally, like as you're well aware, a lot of the best fishing is on main lake points, and they don't have no wake zones on main lake points. So usually the no wake zones are in like pockets, you know,
Or marinas.
little
Marinas, yeah.
marinas pockets. But yeah, no, that's where I find most of the boat traffic that annoys me is on those main lake situations.
So talking about jerkbait fishing, that's something you're really enjoying right now. What's your preferred kind of rod setup for that?
Yeah, so medium, fast tip, 6'6" to 7 foot. What's kind of strange is I used 3 different rods, and I think they all kind of have different applications, if you will, like different locations. So I like a longer rod on a bigger lake with less current, and I like a shorter rod on a river with more current. And I like a little more stiffness on that lake, because what'll generally happen is you'll have longer casts. So longer cast means more line between you and the lure, which means that if you want to get the action on the bait, that a little more stiffness helps with that. So, I mean, some rods companies have a different version of medium than others. So what's kind of interesting is I like my favorite jerkbait rod is actually a St. Croix Bass X rod that I bought. It was my first one. It's 6'6" medium. It's got a real quick tip, but I actually have a medium moderate by Old 18 that I like for that lake application. So that big fish I just caught, the one you guys, like I made a reel about it I don't know, a few days ago. I caught that one on that moderate. And I know moderates aren't, it's not moderate, it's like moderate fast. So it's like it's between, you know, moderate and fast. It's like a moderate fast, but I like that because it's a little more forgiving on the bite. So you're not like ripping hooks out of fish's mouths or stuff like that.
So I watched one of your videos, and you know, you were throwing the jerk baits quite a bit, but you also took a rig with you, and a rigs, to me, that we've used those in the past offshore for doing like salmon fishing and things like that, are very similar a rig, but it's different how you guys use it versus how we use it. Now, the concept of the a rig putting out a school of fish, essentially, from what I understand. When you're pitching that out, what kind of rod are you using for that? Because that looks like a heavy setup.
Yeah, heavy action rod, 7.3 to 7.9. You know, I actually use the glide bait rod I have for that a rig if I can help it, because it throws up to 3 ounces. You know, I generally use 1/8 ounce jig heads. So if you take, you know, if you have 5 of those, then you're already at 5/8. Then whatever the bait weighs, then whatever the rig weighs, so you're easily over an ounce. So I was just generally, the longer the rod, the better, just because the longer the cast. And then like that, I was telling you guys that Dobbins Fury I have, which is a 7.9 medium heavy, but it's like a medium extra heavy. So it's not quite as stiff as a heavy. It'll handle up to 3 ounces, and I really like throwing it on that. And I'll throw, generally speaking, a 6.6 to 1 and 20-pound fluoro.
So with your line selection, I used to use just, straight fluoro or braid for my topwater stuff. Do you size down your fluorocarbon for moving baits, or do you have like a standard that you always go to?
Oh no, I do size down. So I like, if I get away with it, jerk baits, I like 8-pound test, because it gets the bait deeper and it gets better action. Crank, honestly, it's like the lightest line I can get away with, I'll use, just because it gives the bait more action and it gets to the lower end of the depth spectrum that it is supposed to be at. But that's kind of what I ended up doing last week. Was I took off every reel I had, off every rod, and I relined all of them. And one of the things I learned was I used to fish a lot of braid to fluoro, and now I only do that on spinning tackle, because, well, that's not true. I also do it on my jig rod, but that's a story for another time. But anyway, but what I learned is you create another point of weakness in the line by doing, a double uni or whatever it is that you do to connect those. And I've lost fish, like tournament placing fish, on a leader break with a braid to fluoro leader. So if I can get rid of that and eliminate just that extra part of weakness in the line, then I do that. So we talked about it. I do, like you had said, recommend the mono backing for a lot of that stuff. Just one, because the spool, it holds onto the spool. So you don't, like, if you put braid just on a spool, it'll slip, and that's not good. And then you can save money, because mono is a lot cheaper than fluorocarbon.
And you can use some big mono too.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to match your pound or your diameter. You can, for backing, you can be whatever size you want.
Yeah. So what I do, and I'm actually doing it right now, is I just buy this Omniflex from Walmart, and it's like $4, and this is 15-pound test.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Is that what you're using for backing on your fly rods, John?
No, I use 30-pound Dacron.
Yeah.
On because you can't use, if you use straight mono with IGFA, technically you have like 100-foot leader.
Yeah.
So they won't recognize world records if you don't have backing in an actual leader.
Yeah. So go ahead, John.
I was just gonna say, not that I'm after world records or anything, but
State records.
if the chance presents itself.
So Brandon, we've talked a little bit about the technical aspects of what you're doing with different types of presentations and stuff. But one thing I tend to ask a lot of folks, some we never get the chance to, but when you're looking at your tackle box, which we know that we're like tackle freaks, we love to have lots of tackle boxes. But if you were going to build just the most basic tackle box, let's say young person getting ready to go out and do some fishing, everything else, if you were going to put 5 lures, like you're going to go down to Walmart, get 5 lures, what would those 5 lures be that you would recommend?
Square bill, spinner bait, Cinco, because Cincos you can basically hook any way. So I'm just going to assume we're talking like not Texas rig or wacky rig or any of that other stuff. And rooster tail, and like a whopper plopper. And the reason I picked all those is because they're basically all cast and retrieve baits. So they're easy for kids to use, and they're all really, really good baits. And they also kind of work under various applications. So if it's windy or if it's calm, or you know, if it's calm, then you can use finesse. If it's windy, you can throw a spinner bait. You know, if you got a lot of trees, you can use that square bill. Rooster tails work for everything. What- so yeah, and then topwater. I mean, if you're gonna have like an iconic topwater lure, you know, the Whopper Plopper is probably the best one. So,
Dude, so we jumped right into this podcast and we skipped some questions that we typically ask people. I guess because we already know you. But dude, how did you get started fishing?
yeah, so I have a family cabin at Lake of the Ozarks, and my grandfather was big into fishing, crappie fishing, and we would stop at a Greer's Bass Pro gas station on the way down to the lake, and we'd pick up crawdads, and then we'd set out the crawdads overnight. And you know, it's kind of like Christmas. You come down and see what's on the end of your line when you wake up, which I used to love, waking up and checking the poles. And anyway, when I was in high school, I got a chance to go on a trip to Canada with my wrestling team. So I went to Canada with my wrestling coach and some other people, and went up into the Boundary Waters and fished the Quetico, and really enjoyed that. And then I spent the next 20 years paying no attention to fishing whatsoever, and you know, having a life and a family and a job, and doing other things. And then when I'd always thought real fondly of that trip, so I ran into a buddy of mine who takes a trip every year to that same place. And so when I got back from Iraq, I said, you know what, enough time has passed. I'm gonna do this, because you know, tomorrow's not guaranteed. So I did the trip, and that kind of got me back into the fishing bug a little bit. And what ended up happening was I ended up going back to Canada, and then I had a neighbor at the lake at the family cabin who had a Lifetime Tamarack kayak. And I said, hey man, do you care if I borrow that? And he's like, hey, whenever you're down, you want to use it, you can use it. So I started fishing out of a Lifetime Tamarack kayak, and I kind of got the kayak fishing bug, and the rest is history. So.
Oh, that's super cool
Yeah,
that you came back around to it.
Well, you know, I tell people all the time, like, you know, everything that I know about fishing, I've learned in about 18 months, you know, really. I mean, I've been fishing my whole life, but I never really cared to pay that much attention to things like line size, spools, gear ratios, depths, graphs. You know, hell, I fished with the founder of kayak bass fishing and didn't even know who he was. So, you know, but that's just me, man. I'm doing what I love to do. I make no apologies for, you know, being good or bad at what I do. Everybody's on their own journey. And just because you haven't been fishing since you were 8 years old and been in tournaments since you were 8 doesn't mean that you can't go enter a fishing tournament and win one. You know, if the game was already decided before you had the game, then why would you play it?
Exactly, dude.
Yeah, we talk a lot about that. You know, I mean, it's not just for, you know, the people that have, you know, somebody there. Like you had your mentor. You know, John and I, we had our mentors, and that helped to really foster that experience along, especially when you're young and you get to go out and do this. But just to do everything that you've done and come back to it, that's super cool. And I can only imagine. Is your daughter and wife into doing this stuff too?
No, not really. No, I'm kind of on an island with my I married a person who is my exact opposite. So, you know, where I like to go out and adventure and spend a lot of money and you know, fly helicopters and do dangerous things, she likes to stay in the house and, you know, build her little nest. And I mean, don't get me wrong, they go fishing with me occasionally, but it's not, I can't just go fun fish when we're out there. Like I've got to give them the rod and show them what to do. And like, anyway, you know, my wife just as soon just take a worm and a bobber and go out there and sit and relax, you know, and that's just not how That's just not how I roll. So
Yeah.
you gotta have somebody that compliments you, I think, and she does a really good job of that. And my daughter is very kind of artsy fartsy, so she likes to draw and play piano, and she does like to do stuff with her dad, but I don't think it's that she likes to fish. She just likes to spend time with me.
She does take your best photos though. I mean,
Yeah.
She
let's
does a darn good job.
yeah, she does.
Yeah.
Dude,
She likes-
so go
Oh.
ahead.
I was just say she likes that stuff. She likes taking pictures and making videos, and she's got tons of movies she's made in iMovie. So I'm pretty soon I'm going to have my own video editor, I think.
Yeah. That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, which that's fine. I mean, hey, if you don't want to fish, but you want to edit my videos, cool.
Dude, what is your most memorable fish, whether it's the one that got away or the one you caught? If you think of the fish up to this point, what is it?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, so my PB is the fish, my PB largemouth, but the way I caught it was like, remember part about it, because I was fishing with a rock crawler, which is a Spro RK50 crawdad crankbait, and I was absolutely murdering fish that day. Like, it was like bass thumb everywhere, 20, 30, 40 fish, you know. And I go to this place I've never fished before. I mean, the lake I'd fished before, but this spot I'd never fished before. And I threw that rock crawler out, and you know how like the trebles will like get stuck on the bill, and then the line gets stuck in the treble,
Yeah.
and then
Mhm.
it wobbles back to you on top of the water, you know. So I did that, and it started wobbling to me, you know. I was pissed because, you know, I had this anyway. So about 3 feet after it started wobbling back to me, the biggest topwater blow up I've ever seen in my life happens. And it's a 5.5 pound largemouth, like, you know, dead. And I didn't even mean to catch it. And for whatever reason, the fish gods were smiling down on me. And somehow I got a treble hook in that fish's mouth. You know, like, I waited, I let it take the bait, I set the hook, I caught the fish, I put it in the net. And it was the biggest fish I'd ever seen in my life. I mean, up to that point, I think my PB was probably 3.5 or 3 pounds, you know. So it had this huge head, big long body, probably 23 inches, you know. And I caught it on accident. So, I mean, again, we go back to this whole thing, like, you can do everything right and catch nothing, or you can do everything wrong and catch the best thing you've ever caught. I don't know how many fish I've caught by throwing a lure out and it's soaking because I got a backlash and I'm fixing my backlash and, you know, catch a fish. So, and that's one of the funniest parts about fishing is, like, I learned this winter, I threw a jerkbait out, I let it sit because this guy told me he caught a fish on a rock crawler. So I threw the jerkbait out and I was like, oh, you caught it on a rock crawler, and let it sit. And I started tying on the rock crawler, you know, and that jerkbait's out there. And the next thing I know, I see my rod tip just like doing this, like, you know, going down and up and down and up and down and up. And I look, the line is me, and a spotted bass had just, I didn't even work the jerkbait. I just threw it out there and it sat, and the spotted bass caught itself.
Wow.
And I told that guy that I've been skunked all day, and I just accidentally caught this fish.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, you just got to slow down in the winter. They just want it stopped, you know.
So there in Missouri, I know you guys have quite a few fish species, but out of all the species that you've fished for in Missouri, let's say you're targeting one species, what was your most unexpected catch while out doing that?
Yeah, I caught a 21-inch walleye on a jerkbait. Yeah.
I was thinking of that one.
Yeah, I honestly had no idea what I had on the end of my line, so that was fun. I also caught a 11-pound blue cat on a spoon.
and I caught that on like an ultralight rod. So that was pretty fun too. I love catfish. I love catching catfish, but the process of being a cat fisherman, I hate. And what I mean by that is I don't want to catch a bunch of shad and cut them up and have like a blood board on my boat. You know what I mean? Like that's dirty and messy. I don't like cleaning fish, so, but I like catching catfish. I just don't like the messiness of, I mean, if I do fish for catfish, which I do occasionally, I'll just throw a live bluegill on there on a circle hook, and take my chances that way instead of cutting them all up and all that other stuff.
Dude, that's the way to do it, because a whole live gill has a lot better chances of catching a whole lot of other stuff than just cut bait.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I caught flathead catfish love those bluegills. So, and flatheads are really fun to catch too. So I dig it.
Dude, I mean, you've also caught some absolute giant trout.
Yeah.
I kind of have. And I don't know what, I think I've texted you before, John, and said, hey, I caught this trout. It's 23 inches. Is that good?
Yeah. And I was like, at the time, I was like, yeah, that's double my PB.
Yeah.
I had no idea. I'm just up here flinging a jig and, with my little G Loomis IMX trout stick, with my Abu Garcia Zata reel and my 6-pound fluorocarbon, just minding my own business. And what's weird about trout is like, I know that trout fishermen and fly fishermen, you guys have this whole thing about indicators and they're not bobbers and, and
They're bobbers.
They're bobbers.
Guys, you get all worked up about stuff, and that's fine. I get it. But what's crazy is like, I'll be this guy who's in a tracker. I don't know if you guys can see the boat back there, but I'll be in a tracker.
Yeah.
On this trout fishery, this world famous trout fishery. I'm out there in my tracker with my spinning tackle, and I'm pulling in, like 23-inch trout, and these dudes with their, drift boats and their flies and their bobbers, and they're all looking at me like I'm crazy. So I kind of take some pleasure in that, if I'm being honest with you.
Yep.
I
would.
You should.
Yeah, I would.
To me, fishing is fishing. I've seen some of the best fit, people. Sometimes we just overcomplicate it. We get in our own heads and we're like, we have to buy this next bait because that's going to work, and that's going to, and you end up with a shelf full of baits that you're not using right now, because you thought that you needed something when, sometimes just a worm and a hook is all you need. So, but yeah, I very much enjoyed that trout story.
Yeah. If that was here in the PNW and you caught it in a river, it would classify as a steelhead. Literally, anything bigger in certain systems, anything longer than 20 inches is considered a steelhead. So that's a considerably large trout. Now, was it in a lake or a river?
Yeah, so it's a lake, but it fishes like a river. So it's got current. What's crazy about this lake is it is, like I said, fishes like a river, but it's also like, I think 55-degree water year round.
Oh,
so it never fluctuates beyond, a couple degrees all year long. So when I told you I got flipped at Taneycomo in the summer, I got flipped into 55-degree water in the middle of the summer. It was quite frosty, if you know what I mean. But yeah, no, it does, like, it has a dam and it pushes water, and they stock this lake. It's also, I think, got the state, or maybe the United States record for brown trout. I think it was like 38 pounds or something like that in this river. So like I tell John, I live an hour's drive from, basically a world-class fishery for bass, a world-class fishery for trout. And we have a musky lake, 30 minutes north of me. So
yeah, man, I'd be on those.
You couldn't
I've
get
never-
me off that lake, dude.
Yeah, I'd be on there 24/7.
I've never caught a muskie either. I'm too scared to try. They call them the fish at 10,000 casts, and I don't know if I have 10,000 casts worth of patience. You know,
You got to break it up over multiple days, you know. Kind of divide and conquer. I went muskie fishing for the first time a couple of years ago with I had a friend that moved to Wisconsin, and we went out there for like 9 hours. We're just grinding, you know. So you're talking about like heavy action rods, and we're throwing big stuff out. And I know I've told this story before. We're just cast. We're beating brush, we're beating bank, everything else, just like bass fishing. No, all of a sudden it's like hours of boredoms met with like, you know, 3 minutes and nothing but raw raging fury, because this fish with like a leviathan mouth comes up and it's like done, and it clamps onto this huge bait, and you're like, whoa, where'd that thing come from? This place is a mud pit, you know, and there's this huge fish, and then you cast. You're like, oh, my arm hurts. I'm gonna have to drink a lot of beer tonight, you know, to get over this so I can sleep. and all of a sudden, boom, you know, and then it's like another one, but you only get a couple fish for like 9 or 10 hours of fishing. It's like severe dedication.
I would do that. I would do that once or twice, you know, a year. But you know, I've seen those bucktail jigs or those bucktail spinners, like with the double the blades, and they're like this big,
super magnum rooster tail.
Yeah, and I'm like, God, man, I mean, they literally are made out of like 8-gauge wire or something, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, we were throwing this whopper plopper on steroids. It's called this company called Lake X. They make them, and basically it's just like a giant whopper plopper. They make one's called the Dr. Evil. They have another one called the Fat Bastard. The guy's a big Austin Powers fan, I guess. So we were throwing Dr. Evils, and one of them looked like a giant bumblebee, but yeah, like about the size of my microphone here. So if that gives you, and that's the size of bait, but they eat ducks. I mean, they'll come up and swallow a whole mallard. They're like, you know, gone. And you'll see like a head float down the river, and you're like, what got that? That's probably a muskie or a pike.
Yeah.
But you know, we've talked a little bit about what you're doing fishing wise, everything else. What's your future plans looking like over the next? We'll just keep it to a year. We're not doing the 5 or 10 year plan. But what do you got planned this year?
Yeah, so I'm fishing 5 kayak tournaments this year on the MOYAK series, and I'm going to fish one of the All-Americans, which is another kayak series, but it's like a regional kayak series, just to kind of get my feet wet with that. MOYAK's like a 1-day tournament. They're kind of local in Missouri. And then the All-American series is like a regional. They're 2-day tournaments. So I'm gonna fish those. Honestly, like the schedule just keeps like filling up with, you know, we got people from Texas coming up here this summer. Eco wants to do a retreat. Old 18 wants to do a retreat. Third Eye Fishing wants to do a retreat. Pile that on, you know, work and family. You know, it's almost like I'm not going to be able to come up for air this year, which is fine. I much prefer to be busy than to be bored, you know. But this year is kind of my see where I'm at year when it comes to tournament fishing, so that I can, you know, like I told you, this year I wanted to work on my winter fishing and catching bass in the winter. Well, what I want basically from this year is, one, to continue to improve on my content creation, which I feel like I am. You know, I feel like I'm miles from where I started with that, but also to kind of see where I am as a fisherman and then figure out what my weaknesses are so I can work on those for next year. And then hopefully if I have an okay season in the MOYAK, maybe I'll fish more All-Americans next year and eventually be able to fish at like a national level Bassmaster type, you know, kayak Bassmaster tournament or something like that. So yeah, I'm a big fan of baby steps, man. So I know this stuff takes time. I'm not going to be an overnight one-hit wonder or whatever. It just takes hard work at working on your weaknesses.
So the MOYAK, is that I'm a little ignorant of how all the kayak bass fishing goes. So is the MOYAK like a division of the KBF, or is the KBF a completely different entity?
It's a KBF affiliated league. So they have certain number of slots that based off like last year they had basically a tournament where if you won the tournament, you got an invite to the national championship. And then I think they have a certain number of people when you finish X number towards Angler of the Year, you can qualify for the Bassmaster Classic or whatever. So it is a KBF affiliate.
Rad, dude. Well, Brandon, we won't keep you all night, man. And thanks so much, honestly, dude. So the one last thing that I said I was going to bring up something you said, and you said a little bit here, but you're not I'm gonna jack this all up, but you said something along the lines of you're not guaranteed tomorrow, someday, or sometime, and you are constantly grinding and getting it done, and you've got that ambition, and it's it's you can just feel it, dude. Like, so I'm so stoked to see how your tournament year goes and like everything you got going on, dude.
You and me both. At the end of the day, John, all of this is about relationships. You don't leave this planet with fishing rods or poles. The impact you have on people is what your legacy is. So, people say, hey, you're super nice and you're super humble, and it's crazy now. They're like, I'm out fishing local waters and I run into people and they're like, hey, are you Dustoff Fishing? I follow you on Instagram, and it's like, it's crazy to me because, you just have an impact on people you don't even know. So, if I could just tell anybody that's listening, just be a good person. Like, just be nice to people. And if they ask you for something and you don't want to give it to them, just tell them. I think you and I had talked about this, but the only two things you have is like your word and your integrity, and so you just gotta be an honest broker with people, and you and I have had some cool moments, over the last year. You've shared some of your accomplishments with me. I don't know if your listeners know, but are you still in school or not? But anyway, you started school this year and you had like a 3.8 GPA, and you're going through some things, but you're still finding a way to get work and family and all that stuff. You're a paid fly tire for some kind. You said, hey, I'm a whatever, and I said, is that good? You seem happy. And so you say I grind, but you do the same thing, and Brian does too. It's easy to believe in people when they always reward you with you being right, basically. It just takes them to see it. So it's easy to believe in you, John, because you do a damn good job. So
well, thanks, dude.
I don't think you saw that, and so I knew the minute that I asked you for some baits and you sent me some extra ones that we were going to be friends, so and I honestly, when I first met you, pictured you as like an old gray-haired fat man. But you were not. So anyway.
Well, Brandon, this has been so much fun, and it just goes to extenuate our friendship from, now that you remind me, yeah, it's been more like a year and a half of good, solid friendship, sharing a lot of really cool stuff. You sharing all, so much of what you do with everybody else in the world, and being so open and accepting. And I think one of the things that I have to say is that, we have our Instagram fishing family, and we're all over the place. But I really think that if I step back and I look at everything in the big picture, a lot of us are there and together because of you. You really help to bring in that community together, to foster that the good parts of people, not the negativity. And I think that, when John and I started this podcast, we were actually kind of angry about some stuff going on. And I think that the anger didn't come from necessarily the people that were doing it, but it was because we had such cool friends and we're like, what's up with these people? Why, why are they like this? And I think a lot of that is because of yourself and the way that you communicate with everybody and the way that you connect with the rest of the community. So, this is such a privilege and pleasure for us to have you on here, because you are such a huge part of the fishing community, especially our community on Instagram, but also just to have a good person on to set such a good example for so many people in the angling community. It's so important to have people down to earth, and you're down to earth, even though you fly high in the sky for a job. You're down to earth, and it's just a super cool thing. I can't thank you enough for taking, some time out just to come on here and talk to us.
It's my pleasure. It's my privilege, so let's do it again sometime. It'll be fun.
Yeah, absolutely, dude. Well, Brandon, where can everybody find you, dude?
Yeah, so hey, Dustoff_fishing on Instagram, Dustoff Fishing on YouTube, Dustoff Fishing on TikTok. And next week I'm leaving for school in Pennsylvania, so I'm looking forward to some fishing on the East Coast. I'm going to be fishing with a guy named Cody Lockwood a couple times. That in and of itself is going to be an adventure. And Brian, you said something something about being a role model. I have a lot of young people that reach out to me and ask me stuff. I got a kid that asked me if he should buy a truck and what I think of like the motor of this truck or the price, or what do I think about this rod, or he'll tell me his max deadlift was, he got it today and he's excited. And like, that is the thing that makes this social media thing so great. It's not, not all the pats on the back on the posts, but it's like the stuff that goes on behind the scenes. It's like having this conversation with you, fishing with guys like Cody and Russ, talking to these kids about, I had one kid, somebody posted, if you could fish with anybody in the world, who would you fish with? And one kid said Dustoff Fishing.
No, that's so cool.
And so like that, if that doesn't like melt your heart, I don't know what does. So it kind of makes it all worth it. The early mornings, the late nights, the hours and hours and hours on the water or in the phone. When somebody says something like that, how could you not love it? So anyway, I'm done rambling, but I appreciate you fellers for having me on. I love your podcast. I listen to it all the time. I especially like the one with Marty, Nymph-tastic, who, by the way, I'm gonna fish with Marty when I'm in Pennsylvania, thanks to you guys. So, and maybe even Frankie, who is a Wildman Schoenfeld.
Yeah.
I might Frankie too. So it's gonna be an adventure. Everybody just get on the page and follow along. It's gonna be fun.
You best watch out. Marty will get you on some fish where you ain't gonna want to leave.
I bet he will. I'm gonna use that rod you helped me buy.
All right. Well, everybody, thanks again for listening. And you can find us at Working Class Fishing on Instagram, Working Class Fishing Podcast on YouTube, Facebook, Working Class Fishing on TikTok. We've got all that stuff going now. If you've got any questions or just general inquiries, or you want to come on and tell some tall tales and flat out lies with us, come on, shoot us a message. And as always, thanks for listening. See ya.